Okay, today we're going to talk about n8n, and it is all the rage right now if you are in the automation space. If you're not familiar with n8n, it's just like Zapier or Make, where you can create really cool automations with tons of different apps. You can pull data, push data, transform data. You can create triggers based off of emails and connect to Slack and all kinds of cool stuff. Today, I want to talk about the different options that they have. So n8n is open source, but as most commercial open source products, they have an interesting licensing model. And I want to talk about that. I want to talk about the options that you have to help you make an informed decision and why you might want to choose one over the other. It's going to be different for every situation, but I'm going to give you my experience and just general good practices when you're picking a tool like this and where to host it. So on the homepage of n8n, if you go to the pricing, you'll see Starter, Pro, and Enterprise. Now, I'm not going to talk about Enterprise. Enterprise is fairly costly, and it truly is made for enterprise implementations. So unless you're a really large company with thousands of dollars to spend on an automation solution, this may not be the best choice for you, and it's not really the audience that I'm speaking to. But if you are a small business, you want to get into automation, and you're currently using Zapier, or maybe you've done a little bit with it, let me talk about some options here. This is the cloud offering. So n8n is open source, and they offer really two different flavors of their product. So the first one is a community open source. And then they also have the commercial, which is the cloud version, which is what I'm showing here. The cloud starts at $20 a month and then $50 a month. You can also, if you want to upgrade, they have a $120 a month. Now this is annual, so monthly is a bit more. Let's just stick with annual because it's easier. And then this has more workflow executions and active workflows. We'll talk about that in a minute. To find out about the community edition, which they used to have it on their page, I believe. Obviously, they want to push people to buying the commercial edition, so they don't really talk about it here. But in their documentation, they have a Choose Your n8n, where they talk about the different options. And I have these links down below. The self-hosted does what the commercial edition does, except it has a few different missing features. They have some features they'll give you as a bonus if you give them your email address, but let me just briefly talk about what you don't get. Okay, so they have a page on their site where they talk about the options of either using cloud or self-hosted. Now, even though they're wanting people to buy the cloud edition, because that's where they make their revenue, they are super, super supportive of the self-hosted edition. So you're not losing anything in terms of your ability to implement. They have, you get full support. There's a huge community. It's not difficult to do, especially if you're more technical. It's definitely an option, and it's a realistic option. It's not going to take you a week to set it up. It's something you can do in a couple hours or sooner. It's actually a really seamless setup process. So the self-hosted is definitely a great option. The cloud obviously is pre-configured. You just put in your credit card and you register and you're good to go. In a few minutes, you have your instance up and running. And those are really the two main options that you have. And so let's take a look briefly at the community edition. The community edition is the free edition that you can install yourself and host on your own environment. You have full access to the source code, open source. You can make changes to it. It's great for development testing. You can write your own tools and plugins for n8n. It's just really amazing. So even if you get the cloud edition, you can still install community edition for testing and just playing around. But what is it that we don't get with the community edition? And again, as I go through these really briefly, you have to decide really what you're going to want and need and what's important to you. First is custom variables. So custom variables are when you have a piece of information like an email or company name or reusable string that you want to share among all of your workflows. You can create a variable for that in the Pro and Enterprise. The community does not have variables. So Anything you want to do in your workflows, if there's a shared piece of information, you would have to reuse that across all the workflows. May not be a big deal for most people. Environments has to do, it's an enterprise feature, has to do with deploying multiple instances. That's not really what we're talking about here. External secrets and external storage for binary data as well. Enterprise, that's for if you have external secrets like AWS or other external stores where you can encrypt data. And that's also enterprise only. Log streaming as well, something that's only enterprise. Let's jump down to projects because that is something you may be interested in. Projects, if you get the starter, you get one shared project and Pro gives you 3. And the projects is actually a really nice feature because in the Pro edition, if we go to the $50 a month, in the Pro edition, you can create different roles. And I wish they had more than 3, I'll be honest. I think 3 is a really low number. I don't know why they settled on that. But 3 projects gives you the ability to create some boundaries around your workflows. So if you want to have like a private project that only you have access to and maybe give your team access to a different project, you can do that with the Pro edition. In Starter, you get 1 project. And Community, you really don't have projects. So Community is just made for really like everyone has access to everything. That's something to think about. SSO, that's an enterprise feature. And then version control as well is an enterprise feature. But there are ways that you can back up your n8n to GitHub if you want to sort of have the same functionality. It's not as integrated or seamless as the enterprise edition, but there's definitely ways to export your data to GitHub. It exports as XML files, and so those are easily versionable in Git. Okay, so let's go back to the plans and pricing. So going down to the actual features in the Cloud Edition, the Pro Edition is the only one, and Enterprise are the only ones that allow the global variables. You don't get that in Starter. Now, these actually may be something you want to think about. So your maximum execution time for Starter is 5 minutes. That's not a lot of time, especially if you have jobs that run long. And so if you are doing any kind of data manipulation and your tables are larger, it can be frustrating if you're trying to keep it under 5 minutes and maybe it goes 6 minutes or 7 minutes, especially as your data grows. So that's something to definitely be concerned about. Is it really worth it to save $30 a month? The number of executions saved. So when you run your automations to be able to go back and debug them to see what happened, we're only saving 2,500. With the Starter, Pro is 25,000. And same for log retention. Really, it's around how much data, how much visibility you want in your data and for how long. Now, the debugging features, this is actually something interesting. So they actually give you the search executions by data. So being able to search your executions and debug in the editor is something that they're actually providing now if you give your email address on the Community Edition. That's actually a feature you do have access to. And then the project collaboration, so number of projects, the people you have involved in your projects. Now, you could have a single instance, and I know a lot of people sometimes in smaller companies even share logins. For something like this, I get really nervous, especially when we're building our business around a tool like this. And let me just talk about that because I was going to kind of lead into that in a little bit. But I think this is an important concept. The Community Edition is awesome to play with and get familiar with, and even just to see if it's the right tool for you. It's great for figuring out the complexity, the learning curve, seeing if it's the right fit for you. It doesn't cost anything, except it does cost time and dollars in terms of where you're going to actually put it. Now, if you're doing it for yourself, just to play with, you can install it on your local workstation in Mac, Windows. You can use Docker and have it up and running in no time. But if you're running it for your business, you will want to look at a hosted solution and maybe something like DigitalOcean, AWS, and deploy it to the cloud. And at that point, you are really using the Cloud Edition, but you're using a self-hosted Cloud Edition. And what you've done is you've taken the cost away from n8n and you've given the cost to the resources where it's being deployed, but it's not really being supported except by you. In other words, if that server goes down, it runs out of space, whatever things happen in the real world on cloud servers happens to you, you're really on the hook to manage that. And so if you're paying, depending on what server you get, you're paying $20 or $30 a month for a cloud server just so you can host your own with unlimited executions. For an extra $20 a month, $20 or $30 a month, you're getting the full support of n8n. They monitor the instance. They control the updates to the instance along with you, which I'll show you in a second. But it really puts the burden on n8n to manage that infrastructure. And so even though you're getting more executions, really in the end, that's really why people do the community edition, is if they just don't want to have to worry about the execution count. I'll show you mine. So in the Pro edition, which is what I have, they give you access to a dashboard, and the dashboard will actually tell you how many executions that you have. Now I have just under 2,000 for December. Probably will have more next month, but even so, we're not anywhere crushing the 10,000 limit. 10,000 is actually a lot unless you're doing some really crazy stuff repetitively every few minutes, or you have lots of things that are happening all the time. Typically, I don't know your business, so I don't want to say like what is high or low, but for a small business that has a handful of workflows, this should be sufficient. But if you have an instance where you have potentially 50,000 workflows, you have things that run every few minutes and you just want to run them, in that case, it might be a better solution to run the community edition. But again, remember, you're going to be on the hook for that in terms of support. So just be aware of that. So if you have, especially for entrepreneurs, we want to save money, and so we install this open source product, which I love open source. So I actually run several products for our business open source. There's nothing wrong with that. But in terms of automation, it's really such a core part of your business. And if dealing with a customer, you're trying to get a project out the door and your automation stops, it can have a huge impact on your business, especially if it's something stupid, or it's out of disk space, or the Docker engine stopped and you're not sure what happened. The AWS instance had an issue. We've had that before, where a server has to get reallocated because there was a problem with the instance. I mean, anything can happen, and I'm not trying to push you towards the cloud, but I'm just saying be aware of that. So when we're trying to save money with open source, I think there's a valid argument for that. But at the same time, something core to your business, which automations are, I would try to make sure that we have the most stable infrastructure for that. And so that's why I am a big fan of using n8n Cloud. But again, it's up to you. It's going to be based on your own personal needs. This is what we need. So in the dashboard here also, so you really only have control over the version. So when there is a new version, they don't just automatically update your instance. On the Pro version, and I have not run the Enterprise, so I can just tell you on the Pro, if there is a new version, they will give you the notification on the homepage of your instance, but then you have to come in here and actually choose to upgrade it. They don't just do that for you for obvious reasons. Things may change that may break your workflows, and so we don't want to just have them automatically do that for us, and then we come in the morning and half of our workflows are broken because they upgraded it overnight. So you have control over that, and that's pretty much really, and you can restart your workspace, but that's pretty much the options that you have on the Pro edition. One thing else I'd like to say is if you go to the n8n GitHub site, which is where the source code is, and you can really dig into how they're doing things and build your own stuff and look how other people have built their plugins for different products. It's really transparent. It's a really great learning experience if you want to dig into this. But I want to talk briefly about their license, which is a really interesting license. It's called the Fair Code license. Obviously, this is a commercial software, but it's also open source. And this is for people who are not in the open source community, that can feel weird. It's like they're giving it away, sort of, but they're also charging for it. Why would I just not use the free version? Why do I have to pay for it? Well, just because it's free doesn't mean you can do whatever you want with it. So they license the usage of the product very clearly and very specifically. So if we look at the sustainable use license, you can read a little bit about the details in here, but one of the things that they have in here is you may distribute the software to others only if you do so free of charge for non-commercial purposes. So you can't just take n8n and fork it to your own code, change a few things, and then rename it to your own company name and then start selling it. So anything you do has to be done really for free. And this is really the spirit of open source, or we like to keep things this way where, hey, we're giving this to you for free. So out of respect, we want you to also be sharing your improvements with others for free as well. One of the things they also mention on their website as part of this license is you cannot host n8n and then sell access to it, which I thought was interesting. And also the only the main branch of the code is available for, or the main branch is available for, this falls under this license. So, be aware of that. So even though it's free, it's not a license to do whatever you want with it. They have some restrictions around that. So anyway, I hope this is helpful. Like I said, I'm a big fan of the Cloud Edition. If you're going to use this in your business, if you want to use the community, pick a good web hosting. Make sure you know how to support it. Make sure you have monitoring, and that you have the time and you have good processes in place to catch if things go sideways. Because again, if you have a lot of automations that are built on this and your company is dependent on it, you've got to make sure you've got a really solid support infrastructure underneath it. Because if you don't, could be really bad and could have a big impact on downstream if your business has a lot of things that are dependent on these automations. So anyway, I hope that's helpful. Links are below if you want to check it out, and use my referral code if you want to sign up for n8n. And I will see you in the next video. We're going to dig a little bit more into n8n.